So here's some examples of the Lincoln Rath orthography. So we start off with this word here, which is Islam. Islam. So you see they have an apostrophe H. So if you're not familiar, if you don't know that this H is actually silent, you might say Haistlam. But it's not actually Haistlam, it's Aistlam, because this apostrophe is being represented by this letter H here. So I believe this H is kind of like a placeholder. It's basically holding up the apostrophe. Whereas in later orthographies, they just use an apostrophe with nothing underneath it. So this is the hybrid spelling, Islam. You also notice that they used a syllabic M. So the way Lincoln and Rath interpreted this was like, it's kind of pronounced like Istla and then Islam, Islam, which if you really listen to it, especially if you're saying it slowly, it does kind of sound like that. So that was something unique that they did, was they included a lot of their syllabic consonants in words like this, where nowadays we just use a regular M. Islam, and that means today or present time. Another example is Gitlop. Gitlop. So this is actually a Somalgiach word. So git, this would actually be spelled with an E, or if we're really going to be true to Lincoln and Rath, a schwa. So you can see what I was saying before about them leaving schwas out of words, where instead of a G and then something in between, you now have a G right next to a T. So that can be a little bit confusing when you're reading it. And then we have an L, and we have this open O sound, this O, which I have accented. In the dictionary, it's not actually accented, but I included this to be a little more true to their orthography. And I'm thinking of this as like one word. So if this was one word, this would be accented. But if these are two separate words, then you remove the accent. And then in the hybrid spelling, we would insert an E, and the TL would be combined into this barred lambda. That open O would be changed to AU. So this would be Gitlop, which is, of course, Gitlop. The next example here is Legiech. Legiech. So again, there's no vowel in between the L and the G, so you have two consonants right next to each other. You have this epsilon, which sounds like eh, and then we have the X with the cairn on top. So this is Legiech. And this is the hybrid spelling, and this is, of course, Jeffrey Legeich, as they call him nowadays, but in the hybrid spelling and pronunciation, it would be Legiech. Legiech. The next example here is Lakacha. Lakacha. So again, we have a glottalized L right next to a Q and an A. We have a back X. We have the apostrophe H. And then we have a grave accented A. That's the Lincoln and Rath spelling. This is the hybrid spelling. We have an E in between the L, the glottalized L and the K, which helps break them up visually. And then we have an X bar instead of a cairn on top of the X. We have a regular apostrophe instead of the apostrophe H. And then we have an acute accent on top of the A. And lakacha means thimbleberry. The next one here is maslagyu. Maslagyu. So you see here they have their tilted L, which makes the sound. They have the schwa in between the tilde L and the regular G. You have an I and then a grave accented U. It's pretty close to the hybrid spelling, which is everything is the same except for the fact that we have a regular E instead of a schwa, and we have an acute accent on top of the U, so it's pointing off to the right instead of the grave accent where the dash is pointing off to the left. And this means 12. The next example here is menasut. So again, we have that H with the apostrophe on top. The H is silent. If you don't know that, this might look like menashut. But again, you have to ignore this H. It's basically a placeholder. It's holding up that apostrophe. So this is the hybrid spelling, and it's menasut. Menasut. And this is a man's brother. We also have k'aksiud. K'aksiud. So here you see the I with the apostrophe on top, and this is the hybrid spelling. So the I has been separated from the apostrophe, which comes afterwards, and it's in between the I and the U now. So here you have the apostrophe on top of the U. It's meant to be read as like a separate apostrophe. So k'aksiud means Saturday. It also means cut in half. The next example here is sisakias. Sisakias. So again, they don't use the apostrophe here, or the accented A. There's no accent mark on top of the A, because they're assuming that you know that it's supposed to be accented, because this would actually be, if we're being true to the Lincoln Rath orthography and the way that they used, they didn't use vowels, it would actually be like this. So schwas are usually not accented. There are times when they do receive an accent mark. They do receive emphasis, but in this case, it doesn't. So if you see two schwas together like this, it would actually be outranked by this A. So this A is actually where you would place emphasis in the word, so that would be accented. But you can see the fact that they have an S and then an S and then an ejective K. You have three consonants right next to each other, which can be visually kind of crowded. Whereas in the hybrid orthography, these E's are inserted in between these first three consonants, so you get a visual break there. And you can also see that since this E is not accented, this E is not accented, that leaves this A. That gets the acute accent, and this becomes sisakias, which means spruce tree. The next example is tlumkoli. Tlumkoli. So again, nothing in between these two consonants. Actually, I have three consonants in a row. You can have two consonants right after another in some situations, but usually not in these kinds of cases. In this case here, you would put a schwa in between this ejective barred lambda and this syllabic M. And that's what happens in the hybrid orthography spelling, where we have tlumkoli. Tlumkoli. And that means bunchberries. And the last example here is isla kyala. Isla kyala. So this is interesting because they have this syllabic L after the S. So it would actually be like this. Isla kyala. So this syllabic L is meant to be read as EL. So this would actually be, according to the Lincoln Rath interpretation, SEL. And again, we have this glottal stop or this apostrophe. You're meant to ignore that H. So it's not ha-hi-sala-kyala. It's, you see here in the hybrid spelling, we've removed that H and there's just a regular apostrophe. So basically this apostrophe is meant to break up this A and this I, because A and I together under normal circumstances would say eh. But it's not hes-la-kyala, so we need to break it up visually. So we have this A and then an apostrophe and an I. So this is meant to be read as ah and then E. Ha-isla-kyala. So if we took the Lincoln and Rath spelling, it would actually be like this. The syllabic L would be E-L. And that's very interesting because this actually fits with the way Haisla words actually work. You don't normally see an S and an L together like this. Usually it'll be broken up, but in the past few decades, the pronunciation of Haisla basically has become Haisla. So you can, in this case, you can pronounce it without the schwa in the middle. But this is very interesting because this points to an older pronunciation. This is how the word used to be pronounced by our ancestors. It would actually be Haisla-kyala. But nowadays we tend to say Haisla-kyala. So we tend to not include the schwa or the E in between the S and the L. And this means Haisla language, or to speak Haisla. So that is a look at the Lincoln and Rath orthography. So this is a video that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. I'll be totally honest, the Lincoln and Rath dictionary is my go-to. Partly because there are so many entries in the dictionary. That can actually be a little bit problematic. The fact that there's over 14,000 words, there's a lot to go through. Some of it can be a little repetitive. So there's actually pages of examples for like one word. So they've basically included like every possibility of that root word in use. So it can get a little bit repetitive, and there's a lot of space taken up by some of those repetitive words. So that can be a little bit problematic, but they do have entries that you don't see in other dictionaries. You see example sentences being used. Their orthography is very accurate according to Haisla pronunciation, especially the older pronunciation. So there's a lot going for it. And when I'm looking up words, I more often than not will go straight to Lincoln and Rath. There's also the root word listing, which is also very helpful. It has helped me a lot in my own understanding of the Haisla language. So all in all, I really think that the Lincoln and Rath orthography and their dictionary was a big leap forward in documenting the Haisla language. It's very useful. It does take a lot of training though. So that's it for this video. I'll say Anastach Nugutla kan Homia Ux. Thank you for watching. Wah.